I'm David Ruiz, 36 graphic designer and at least biologically a father. The baptism was held at St. Clement's Church, a sandstone cathedral tucked between gentrified condos and ancient oak trees on the east side of the city. The kind of church where candles always burn, whether someone lit them or not. Morning light slid through stained glass windows, coloring everyone's skin in sacred, shifting mosaics. I stood near the back, behind a pillar, watching the pews fill. There were white satin bows on every bench, rose petals strewn in the aisle, and a faint smell of lavender oil clinging to the wooden floor. A harpist played near the altar live music, which felt a bit much, considering how quiet they'd kept the invitation. Technically, I was invited. An email, 2 lines, no phone call, no, "Hey, we'd love for you to be there." Just a subject line that read, "Sunday." For Ava, I came anyway. I brought a small silver bracelet for the baby. At the front of the church stood Maya and Caleb. She wore a cream-colored lace dress, hair pinned in soft coils. He had on a navy suit that didn't quite fit right too tight across the shoulders. They looked like the picture-perfect couple. No one would guess that 3 years ago. Maya had asked me to donate sperm because her fiancé was infertile, and they wanted a baby before she turned 30. No one would guess I said yes, thinking it meant something more than a transaction. I took a seat near the back. Not the last pew, but close enough to feel disposable. Caleb's cousin, the MC type of guy who always inserts himself into everything, stepped up and tapped a spoon against his phone like it was a champagne glass. "Before we begin," he announced, "we just want to thank everyone who made the effort to be here today. Family, friends, and those who mean the world to little Ava." People clapped. A few laughed. Then he gestured to the small group near the altar. "So let me introduce the parents, Maya and Caleb, and of course, Ava's godparents, Caleb's sister Julia, and our good friend and mentor, Father Michael." The crowd murmured approval. And somewhere in the crowd, we also have the, biological contributor. Our favorite little anecdote for when Ava gets older. David, the sperm donor. He said it with a smirk. Heads turned. I was still seated. I gave a tight smile and a half wave, like I was at someone else's wedding and just got thanked for driving the florist. "Thanks for your contribution, buddy," he added, to Chuckles. The air left my lungs. I stood up slowly, partly because sitting any longer felt like surrender, partly because I wanted to walk out and never come back. As I stepped into the aisle, someone reached out and touched my arm. It was Mrs. O'Hara, the church secretary. "Don't go," she whispered. I wasn't planning to make a scene. I replied, quietly. Her hand stayed on my arm, surprisingly firm for a woman in her 70s. "You might want to wait until the priest reads the list." I looked up. The priest had approached the pulpit, a tall, solemn man with thinning white hair and fingers like driftwood. He adjusted his glasses and unfolded a piece of thick, cream stationery. Before the ceremony, he said, voice clear and measured, "I'd like to read aloud the names of the godparents who will be recorded in the church's official baptismal ledger. These are not symbolic names, they are commitments." He cleared his throat. "For Ava Ruiz, child of Maya Elena Thomas," and there was a pause. A long one. I saw Maya's neck stiffen. "And David Rafael Ruiz." The crowd rustled. Caleb stepped forward, whispering something to the priest. The priest ignored him. The godparents listed in the official documentation, signed and sealed, are Julia Grace Moreno and David Rafael Ruiz. A woman in the front row gasped. Silence fell. Even the harpist froze mid-note. I didn't move. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't shrink. I just stood there, still, as everyone slowly turned not toward Maya, not toward Caleb, but toward me, and in that strange, dense pause, I could feel it how every laugh that had bounced off the stone walls now hung awkward and unfinished. If you've ever been publicly humiliated by people you once loved and then had the truth handed back to you like thunder, drop a comment, or just let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I met the priest's eyes. He gave a small nod. The tide had turned, and I hadn't even said a word yet. No one spoke right away. Even the air seemed caught in its own throat. My feet stayed rooted on the red-carpeted aisle as pews full of relatives and distant acquaintances turned their heads like sunflowers seeking a different sun. Maya didn't move. Caleb was whispering to her harshly, now hunched slightly, eyes darting between me and the priest, like he was solving an equation that refused to balance. She just blinked, jaw tight, one hand still resting on Ava's white lace bonnet. The priest stepped down from the pulpit, folding the list with a deliberate slowness that made every gesture feel like a declaration. Then he looked directly at me. "Mr. Ruiz, if you would join us at the front, please." It wasn't a request. It was the tone of someone restoring order. I walked the length of the aisle slowly, not to make a show of it, but because everything felt surreal, like moving through thick fog. A few people whispered as I passed. Others just watched with uncomfortable politeness. I could feel the weight of every glance pressing into my spine. As I reached the altar, I stepped beside Maya. She still hadn't looked at me. Ava made a soft gurgling noise from the crook of her arm. Caleb's face was flushed. He muttered something to the priest again. I caught the words "must be a mistake," and not what we agreed. The priest held up his hand. These names were submitted 3 weeks ago, with signatures from both parents. Are you saying the documents were falsified? The air turned cold. Caleb shook his head quickly, lips twitching like he wanted to fight the urge to speak. Then, at last, Maya turned her face toward me, not fully. Just enough that I could see her eyes and the trace of something like guilt flickering behind them. "Let's continue," she said softly, barely audible. The priest nodded. "Very well." He dipped his fingers into the silver basin and began the baptismal rites. "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." Water poured over Ava's tiny forehead. She blinked up at the world with a startled little frown. I felt something twist behind my ribs. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was just this aching, surreal sadness watching my daughter be brought into a world that already wanted to rewrite who belonged to her. After the final blessing, the priest gestured for the godparents to come forward for the candle lighting. Julia moved quickly, her heels clicking. She gave me a brief, apologetic smile before taking her place on the other side of the font. Then the priest handed me the tall white candle. I lit it from the Easter flame. Maya didn't object. Neither did Caleb. Because now, in front of everyone, objecting would mean more questions. Questions they weren't ready to answer. Once the service ended, people began filtering toward the back, where a small table of hors d'oeuvres and sparkling cider awaited. That was when the whispers picked up again. Louder this time, fragments of conversations. Half-turned heads, sharp little glances. "Wait. He's the godfather. I thought she said it was anonymous. But didn't he used to date her? They said he just donated." I stood near the windows, arms folded. A few people came over to say awkward hellos. One elderly woman from Maya's side clutched my hand and said, "It's so lovely to meet the father," then wandered off with a plate of cheese cubes. Maya didn't speak to me during the reception. She busied herself wiping Ava's chin, adjusting bows, hugging guests. But Julia approached. She was Caleb's sister, a pediatrician, smart and kind in that no-nonsense kind of way. We'd talked briefly years ago, back when Maya first floated the idea of using my sperm. Julia had been skeptical. Now she stood in front of me, arms crossed like mine. "You weren't supposed to be in the paperwork." "Were you?" she asked bluntly. "I signed what Maya asked me to sign," I said. "3 weeks ago." She showed up with the forms and said they needed a name for the godfather. Said it was symbolic. Julia gave a low whistle. "Symbolic doesn't go into the church ledger." I nodded. She studied me. "You want to be in her life?" I looked at the table where Ava lay, kicking her tiny feet inside a woven Moses basket. "More than they've let me." Julia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, Caleb has always had a fragile ego. This might crack him." "I didn't do it to crack him." "I know, but he's not going to forgive it easily." I looked at her. "Would you?" Julia hesitated, then shrugged. "If it were me, I'd be thanking the guy who gave my niece life. But that's just me." She walked away, leaving me with the sound of clinking glasses and muted organ music looping from the background speaker. A few minutes later, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Maya. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, holding Ava now, who had finally fallen asleep, cheeks flushed pink from the heat. "We need to talk," she said. I nodded. I figured, not here. "Tomorrow," she hesitated, then said, "I'll text you." I almost asked if she really would, but stopped myself. Instead, I just said, "Thank you for not denying it." Her face twitched. "I didn't plan for this." "You didn't plan for me to show up? Or for the priest to read my name?" She didn't answer. Then she turned, and just like that, the space between us reopened. But something had shifted. Not in her. Not yet. In the people around her. I watched as a woman I didn't recognize approached Maya, gestured toward me, and said something in a low voice. Maya shook her head quickly, but the woman kept pressing. "Someone else?" Caleb's uncle maybe glanced at me, then at Caleb, then walked away with his mouth tight. The silence was spreading like ink on linen. I picked up my coat and walked toward the exit. As I passed the altar, I paused beside the font. The candle I had lit was still glowing faintly. I stood there, watching the flame dance, waiting for it to die. But it didn't. It held. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch fully dressed, the church program still folded on my chest like some sacred artifact. The word Godfather was printed in delicate script under my name, right below Julia's. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't feel like vindication. It felt like someone had finally said my name out loud in the room where I was already standing. At 3:14 a.m., I got a text. "Maya, come by the house tomorrow around 11. Caleb won't be home. No emojis, no pleasantries, just coordinates." I arrived 5 minutes early and sat in my car for 10 minutes pretending to check emails. The sun was already glaring off the sidewalk. Her neighborhood looked too clean. Pale brick walls, clipped hedges, a pink scooter overturned on the lawn 2 houses down. At exactly 11:01, I rang the bell. The door opened a moment later. Maya stood there barefoot, in an oversized sweater and yoga pants. Hair up. No makeup, just her. Her eyes were tired, not in the newborn baby way, but in that ancient, soul-deep exhaustion that only secrets can create. "Come in," she said. I stepped inside. Everything smelled faintly of formula and vanilla candles. A faint lullaby hummed from the baby monitor. The living room was neat, in that freshly cleaned for company way. Not a toy in sight. She gestured toward the couch. "You want water?" "No?" I said. "Thanks." She sat across from me, not beside me, For a moment, we just looked at each other. All the polished words we might have used were gone, just raw edges now. I didn't mean for it to happen that way, she said. The priest. I didn't know he'd read the legal forms, but you submitted them. I had to list someone. Caleb assumed it would be Julia and Father Michael. He didn't think I'd put you. I told him I would. Originally, when we first planned the baptism, but he thought I changed my mind. You didn't correct him. She looked down at her hands. No, I let the silence hang. I put you on the paperwork, she said. Finally. Because deep down I knew, if anything happened to us, or to me, Ava would need to know the truth. That she wasn't just manufactured. That she came from someone who loved her before she existed. Those words hit harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten. I did love her before she existed. I said, "You know that." Maya nodded. But I didn't let you. No, you didn't. The lullaby looped again through the monitor, soft, chiming, too sweet for the sharpness in the room. Caleb's furious, she said. I figured. He feels betrayed, like I was keeping you hidden in plain sight. You were. She winced. I asked to be involved. I reminded her, even just as a friend. You said it would be too complicated, that Caleb needed to feel like the only father. It was complicated. No, I said. It was convenient. She looked at me, and for the first time since Ava's birth, I saw something crack in her expression. Not tears, not guilt, something closer to fear. The kind of fear that comes when a truth finally breathes on its own. I didn't know how to hold space for all of it, she said. For Caleb's feelings. For yours. For what Ava might ask one day. I kept simplifying the story until you disappeared. And now I'm back, I said quietly. Yes. We sat there like that, two people with too much history, not enough present, and a future neither of us could predict. You want to see her? She asked suddenly. I nodded. Maya stood and disappeared down the hallway. I heard a door creak open, soft cooing, the rustle of fabric. Then she returned holding Ava in her arms. She looked like herself, not just a baby, but a small person, wide hazel eyes, wisps of dark hair curling at the edges. One fist tucked under her chin like she was pondering something in a dream. Maya held her out. I took her gently. My arms remembered the weight, even if my life had forgotten it. She was warm, solid, real. Not a concept, not a contribution, a daughter. Ava stirred, then blinked up at me. Hey, I whispered. Her tiny mouth puckered, then relaxed again. She has your nose, Maya said, her voice low. I smiled a little. Poor kid. Maya laughed softly, despite herself. For a while we didn't speak. Ava nestled against my chest, eyes fluttering shut again. You know this changes everything, Maya said. Yeah. Caleb won't want you around. I won't disappear again. She looked down. I'm not sure how to make space for you. For all of this. You don't have to figure it out today, I know. But if I don't figure it out soon. She trailed off. I gently rocked Ava, even though she was already asleep. I'm not here to destroy your family, I said. But I won't let mine forget I exist. Maya looked at me, then at Ava. Her mouth pressed into a line. Okay, it wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either. She took Ava back and cradled her with the ease of repetition. I'll talk to Caleb. I stood, walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth. Thank you for putting my name down. Maya didn't turn around, but I saw her nod. I left the house and stepped back into the sunlight, blinking at the shock of it. The world kept moving, cars passed. Kids laughed in yards. A sprinkler turned rhythmically on someone's lawn, but something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I didn't feel erased anymore. Later that night, I received a photo. Ava in her baptism dress, clutching the candle we lit together. No caption, just the photo. Then a second one, a close-up of the church ledger, my name beside hers. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't won. There were no winners here. But someone, somewhere, had written my name in ink. The days after the baptism were quieter than I expected. No angry phone calls, no furious texts from Caleb, no middle-of-the-night knock on the door. For a while, I wondered if the silence was some kind of tactic, one final erasure by omission. But then, Maya called. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I was working on a freelance logo design for a cafe in Montreal when the phone buzzed. "He's gone," she said simply. I paused. Gone where? To his sister's, Julia's. Took an overnight bag and said he needed space. Said I crossed a line. I sank deeper into my chair. "I'm sorry. I'm not telling you to make you feel guilty," she said. "I'm telling you because this fallout, it's happening, and you're a part of it. Do you want me to back off?" There was a long pause. "No, I don't." Those 3 words felt like they'd taken her more effort than she'd admit. I waited, letting her find her way through the rest. "He accused me of lying," she continued, "of having feelings for you. He asked if I ever really planned to keep him as Ava's father, or if I just used him to get what I wanted. And did you? I didn't think I was using anyone," she said. "I thought I was building a future. But now, it all feels like scaffolding, like we held everything up with words we never believed fully." I didn't respond. There wasn't a right thing to say. She sighed. "I don't know what to do. You don't have to figure it out tonight." I echoed back her words from before. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I remember." We didn't talk long. She hung up before Ava woke up. But the way she said "I don't" lingered with me for hours, like a surrender that felt more like an opening than a defeat. That weekend, I got to spend time with Ava. Not at Maya's house, she didn't want the neighbors talking, but at a quiet park 20 minutes away, near a nature reserve where the trees made shadows long and forgiving. She was bundled in a pale blue onesie with embroidered clouds and tiny socks that never stayed on. Maya brought her in the stroller and handed her over without ceremony. "She's fed, changed. Should be good for at least 2 hours," she said. I took Ava in my arms and sat with her on a park bench under a canopy of branches. The sun flickered through the leaves in soft, dappled patterns, and the air smelled like grass and distant lake water. She stared up at me with those huge, curious eyes, too young to know anything, but too alive to be neutral. She was watching, absorbing. I didn't say much. I didn't want to fill the space with stories she couldn't understand. I just let her rest against me, her tiny hands opening and closing like she was practicing how to grasp the world. Occasionally, I'd glance at Maya, sitting nearby on a picnic blanket, pretending to read a book, but her eyes kept flicking toward us, cautious, distant, still figuring out how much space she was willing to give. When it was time to go, she stood and stretched. "Next time we'll try a little longer," she said. "Next time," I echoed. That evening, I texted Julia. I didn't expect a reply, but she responded within minutes. "Me. Thanks for standing up for me. You didn't have to. Julia. You're Ava's father. I was just making sure the story stayed true. We ended up talking for over an hour. She told me Caleb had been quiet, withdrawn, that he hadn't eaten much, just kept pacing around her guest room. He's not angry at you," she said. "He's angry that you didn't disappear like he thought you would. I was never planning to disappear," I said. I believe that. But you scared him. David, you exist in a space he tried to eliminate. That kind of truth doesn't vanish just because you draw a nicer version over it. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing. Julia didn't press. She was good at knowing where the edges were. Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing Ava, always in secret. Parks, cafes that allowed strollers. A quiet walk by the marina on a foggy morning where she slept the entire time. One hand curled around my thumb. Maya never smiled in those moments, but she never stopped them either. One day, she met me outside a museum. We didn't go in, we just stood by the stone lion statues near the entrance while Ava blinked at the sky. I told my parents. She said. I raised an eyebrow. Told them what? That you're not just a donor, that you're the father. What did they say? They said, we know. I laughed, surprised. Seriously. They said it was obvious, that Caleb's never looked like a father the way I looked like a mother. I nodded slowly. That must have been hard to hear. She shrugged. It made me cry for a second. Then it made me feel relief. She reached into the stroller and adjusted Ava's hat. Do you want to hold her while I run inside and grab coffee? Of course. She handed Ava over like it was the most natural thing in the world. When she returned 10 minutes later with 2 coffees, I was bouncing Ava gently, singing off-key to some old song from my childhood. You're good with her, Maya said. I've practiced in dreams for a while. She handed me one of the cups. Decaf oat milk. Hope that's okay. Perfect. We stood in silence, sipping. Ava cooed in my arms and stared up at a passing cloud like she was trying to memorize its shape. Maya spoke again, voice low. I told Caleb he needed to come home. Not because I forgave him, but because this isn't just about him anymore. It's about what Ava's going to need. I looked at her. And what does she need? Stability, she said. But not a lie. That landed heavy. I nodded. Are you ready for joint custody? She asked suddenly, turning to face me. Not now, not next week. But eventually. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, yes. She nodded. No smile, just an acknowledgement. Then she added, then we better start planning what that looks like. The breeze picked up and Ava sneezed a tiny squeak of surprise that made us both laugh. In that moment, everything felt possible. Not easy. Not perfect, but possible. The word custody haunted me for days. Not because I didn't want it, because I did. Desperately. But because it meant untangling the knots that Maya had spent 2 years tightening. Custody wasn't a word you whispered in passing. It was paperwork, structure, definitions. And we'd built everything so far on ambiguity. I started keeping a journal, not for legal reasons, but because I needed somewhere to process what was finally becoming real. I recorded the dates I saw Ava, the times she smiled, the songs that soothed her, the foods she reached for. I even printed out the photos Maya sent me and taped them to the pages, each one a silent anchor reminding me that fatherhood wasn't some abstract title granted by others. It was repetition, presence, skin on skin, hour by hour witnessing. One night, around 11 p.m., my phone rang. Maya, can you come over? She asked. Her voice was shaking. Is she okay? I was already grabbing my keys. She's burning up. Fever. 102.8. I don't know what to do. Caleb's not here. I'm on my way. It took 12 minutes. I didn't stop at any lights. When I arrived, Maya was pacing barefoot in the hallway, her hair a tangled mess. Ava pressed against her chest, red-faced and groggy. She won't keep anything down, she said. I gave her Tylenol, but she's still so hot. Let me take her. Maya hesitated only a second before handing her over. I touched Ava's forehead. She was blazing. We need to cool her down, I said calmly. Wet cloth. Lukewarm. Keep the room quiet. No bouncing. Maya disappeared into the kitchen. I sat on the couch with Ava in my arms, whispering gently. She was too tired to cry. Her breaths were shallow, the way they get when a baby's fighting something their body doesn't yet understand. Maya returned with the cloth and sat beside me. We pressed it gently to Ava's skin in slow, rhythmic dabs. I could feel Maya's shoulders shaking. Don't cry, I said. I'm not crying. You're trembling. She's all I have, she whispered. You have more than you think. Her eyes met mine. What if something happens to her? Then we handle it together. The word hung in the air together. It was new here. Fragile. But it didn't shatter. We spent the next hour watching her fever dip bit by bit. By midnight, she was dozing lightly in Maya's arms, cheeks still flushed but her breathing steadier. We stayed quiet, not wanting to break the spell. You were calm, Maya said eventually. I've read too many pediatric blogs. She smiled faintly. I should have called you sooner. You called when it mattered. She looked down at Ava. This isn't going to be simple, is it? No? Do you want her overnight next week? My heart skipped. Seriously, I think we should start with small stretches. One night, then maybe a weekend. I'd love that. She nodded slowly, like she was saying it more to herself than to me. I stayed until 2, just in case the fever spiked again. Before I left, Maya handed me a list she'd scribbled out on a napkin: Ava's feeding times, emergency contacts, the brand of pacifier she preferred. The napkin felt like a map to a world I'd been circling for years but never allowed to enter. When I got home, I folded it and tucked it into my journal. The next week, Ava came to my apartment. Maya brought her in the afternoon, a small overnight bag in hand, her expression unreadable. Call me if anything, she said, even if it's nothing. I will. I watched as she lingered at the door, then finally turned and walked back down the hall. Ava looked around the apartment like she was trying to memorize it. I'd baby-proofed the obvious things: plug covers, cabinet locks. I'd even bought a second-hand crib and painted tiny blue stars on the side. I cooked soft carrots and mashed bananas and queued up an obnoxious lullaby playlist on my phone. That night, she didn't sleep much. She fussed, then cried, then calmed, only to start again at 3 a.m. But around 4:15 she finally collapsed in my arms and stayed there, head pressed to my chest. Her fingers curled around the collar of my shirt like she'd decided I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't sleep. I just held her. At 7 a.m., Maya texted. Maya, how'd it go? I sent a photo of Ava sleeping on my chest, both of us rumpled and bleary-eyed. We survived. She didn't reply immediately. Then finally, Maya, you're a natural. The next time she came over, it was to drop off a few more of Ava's things: clothes, books, a favorite stuffed elephant that smelled vaguely of lavender. This is starting to feel real, she said as she handed over the bag. It is real. I know. I'm just adjusting. How's Caleb still gone? We talk, but it's tense. He doesn't ask about you. He doesn't ask about her, either. Not really. Are you okay? She nodded. Slowly. I think I will be. That evening, Ava sat in my lap as we flipped through one of her books. Goodnight Moon. Pages bent at the corners from so many readings. Look, I said, pointing. The quiet old lady whispering hush. Ava slapped the page with delight. After I put her to bed, I stood by the crib and just watched her sleep for a while. Her chest rising and falling, the tiny snore she made when she rolled to her side. I thought about how many moments I'd missed. Her first laugh, her first tooth, her first time standing on wobbly legs. But there was a strange comfort in knowing I hadn't missed everything. That some part of this ordinary miracle was still mine to witness. Maya came to pick her up the next morning. How was it, she asked. Loud, beautiful, tiring. She smiled. Sounds about right. Before she left, she lingered in the doorway again. Do you think she'll understand someday, Maya asked. All of this? I looked at her. I think she'll feel it before she understands it. We stood there for a second longer. Something fragile but whole between us. You want her again next weekend, she asked. I nodded. Always. Maya buckled Ava into the car seat. I watched as she drove away, a tiny hand pressed against the back window, waving without knowing she was waving. I stood there long after the car was gone. This time, I didn't feel like I was waiting. I felt like I belonged. By mid-autumn, the rhythm of our strange new life had started to take hold. Friday pickups, Sunday drop-offs. A quiet hour in the park midweek when Maya's schedule allowed. Ava was crawling now, fast and determined, with this little grunt she made whenever she pushed off the floor. I started rearranging my entire apartment just to keep up. Bookshelves moved, sharp corners padded, outlets sealed with covers. It became a place where she belonged, not just a guest, but a resident of joy. My neighbors began to notice. You've got a little one now, asked Mr. Ung from down the hall one Saturday morning, when I stepped into the corridor with Ava on my hip and a diaper bag slung over my shoulder. Yeah, I said. My daughter. His eyes lit up. She's beautiful. Looks like you. It was the first time anyone outside our complicated triangle had said it so plainly. That same weekend, Maya and I sat at a cafe while Ava napped in her stroller beside us. We hadn't had a conversation in a while that wasn't about formula or sleep schedules or next weekend's timing. So, I said, stirring my tea, is Caleb coming back? She looked up from her coffee slowly. He's moving into his own place. I paused. Is that what you want? No, she said, but it's what's happening. I nodded. Because of me, because of us. She clarified, because the version of our life we promised each other couldn't survive what actually happened. And what happened? She sighed. I lied to everyone, including myself. I told myself Caleb could be her father because biology didn't matter, that you were just the seed. But you weren't. You were already something else. And I saw it. From the moment I told you I was pregnant, you were already in it. I blinked at the emotion that swelled up unexpectedly. I wish I'd fought harder for the truth. I admitted, but I was scared. So was I. We sat in silence for a while, the buzz of the street softening around us. The leaves had started falling in slow, golden flurries. The stroller wobbled slightly with Ava's movements beneath the blanket. You're a good father, David, she said softly. I looked at her, surprised. I mean it, she continued. She lights up when she sees you, and when you're not around, she looks for you. Thank you. Maya's gaze dropped to her cup. I'm not saying this to undo everything, just to acknowledge it. You matter. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That one sentence, you matter, hit deeper than she probably realized. Maybe she did realize. We didn't talk about the future that day. Not in big, sweeping terms. But later that evening, she sent me a shared calendar invite, a custody schedule simple, color-coded, alternating weekends and holidays. No lawyer yet, just us. I stared at it on my screen for a long time before clicking, except the next time I picked up Ava. Maya handed me a small manila folder. What's this? I asked. Her pediatric records, she said. Vaccine schedule, emergency contacts. You should have copies. I ran my fingers over the folder. It was warm from her hands. You didn't have to. I did, she said. You're her father. Hearing it aloud didn't get easier, but it did feel more permanent. That weekend, Ava took her first step. It happened in my kitchen, between the fridge and the table, while I was crouched with a toy in hand and she was determined to get to it. She lifted one chubby foot, then the other, and waddled with wild, unbalanced grace, 2 full steps before collapsing in a fit of giggles. I froze. Then I shouted so loud I scared both of us. You did it, I whispered, scooping her up and spinning in a slow circle. You walked. She squealed with joy, clearly feeding off my excitement, even if she didn't quite know what the fuss was about. I texted Maya. Me 2 steps. In the kitchen. Just now. She replied instantly. Maya omg. Did you get it on video? I hadn't. But I described it in detail. The wobbly legs, the pure joy, the triumph. I offered to come by the next day so she could see it herself. No need. She wrote, she'll show me when she's ready. I'm just glad you were there for it. Something about that made my throat close up. A quiet acknowledgement that there would be firsts she wouldn't always witness, and she was making peace with that. Parenthood wasn't about winning or losing moments. It was about showing up, again and again, even when the light didn't shine on you. Later that week, Maya invited me over for dinner. Not just to drop Ava off, but to stay, eat, talk. I made too much, she said with a nervous laugh. We sat at the small kitchen table while Ava smeared sweet potatoes across her tray. Maya and I passed napkins, laughed at the mess, told stories we hadn't shared in years. It feels normal, I said. It is normal, she replied. It just took us a long time to get here. We didn't talk about Caleb. He'd become a shadow that neither of us needed to wrestle anymore. His name had weight, yes, but not permanence. After dinner, Maya walked me to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for letting me. We stood in silence for a beat. She looked at me, then reached out and placed her hand gently on my arm. You know, if we'd done things differently, maybe this would have looked different. Maybe, I said. But Ava's here, she continued. And that's what matters. Yes. We parted quietly. The next morning, Ava said da, clear, loud, direct. She was pointing at me. I froze. You said it again, I whispered. Say it one more time. She just laughed and said it again. Da. That night, I recorded her babbling and sent it to Maya. Me. She said it. Maya. She knows. It wasn't just a sound. It was a recognition. She knew who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I knew too. By winter, everything had settled into a kind of quiet rhythm, one that no longer felt borrowed. My apartment had become more than just Dad's place. It was hers too. Her playpen stood like a small fortress in the corner of the living room. Spoons and bibs cluttered the kitchen drawers. The fridge was covered with photos and crooked finger paintings, all signed in Maya's careful handwriting, Ava, 19 months. There were nights when Ava didn't want to leave. One Sunday, Maya showed up at my door, wrapped in a thick scarf and coat, expecting the usual handoff. Ava looked at her, clung tighter to my leg, and shook her head. Do I take that personally? Maya joked, crouching down. She didn't nap long, I said. She's cranky. But Ava wouldn't budge. She turned her face into my jeans and made this low whimper that sounded like the start of a tantrum. I can try again in a few, I offered. Let her wind down a little. Maya stood and pulled her gloves off. Actually, would it be okay if I just stayed here for dinner? We can eat, talk. Then when she's ready, I'll take her home. Of course, I said. I wasn't sure who was more surprised by her offer, her or me. We ordered Thai food. Ava sat between us at the table, spooning sticky rice into her mouth and dropping more on the floor than she ate. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't mention Caleb. We talked about Ava's favorite songs, her new habit of hiding toys in my shoes, her deep obsession with ducks. At one point, Maya looked around the apartment and smiled. "You've built a real home for her." I shrugged, a little embarrassed. Still feels like I'm catching up. "You're not," she said. "You're here, after dinner." I gave Ava a bath while Maya cleaned up. I could hear her humming in the kitchen, singing one of the lullabies we used to laugh about in college. "Hush, little baby," in a voice just above a whisper. Ava fell asleep quickly that night, her tiny hand clutching one of my fingers like it was a lifeline. When Maya came in to check, she paused by the crib, just watching. "She's safe here," she said, almost to herself. "She always will be." Maya looked at me, eyes tired but soft. "I wish I'd trusted you sooner." I didn't say anything. Some things didn't need to be acknowledged out loud. She left quietly, like someone leaving a church. And I stood at the door a long time after she was gone. The following weekend, we had our first shared holiday, Christmas Eve. Maya had suggested it tentatively, unsure if I'd be willing to spend the day together. But I said yes before she even finished the question. We took Ava to a tree lighting downtown. Her eyes lit up at the blinking lights, the giant inflatable reindeer, the soft snow catching in her hair. We took pictures, drank hot cider. Maya wore mittens with tiny red foxes on them. I teased her. She teased me back. It felt like something whole, even if it wasn't. Later that night, back at Maya's place, we unwrapped one gift each. Ava pulled the bow off her box and squealed with delight at a stuffed penguin that honked when squeezed. She held it up like it was an ancient treasure, showing it proudly to both of us. Maya handed me a small package. "You didn't have to," I said. "Open it." Inside was a leather keychain engraved with a single word, "Dad." It was simple, quiet, true. "I figured it's official now," she said, eyes glinting. I held it in my palm for a moment before speaking. "I never needed a title." "I know," she said. "But maybe it needed you." That night, I walked home through the snow, the keychain in my pocket, warm from my grip. I passed houses lit up with decorations, windows full of paper snowflakes and blinking lights, and for once, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I was building something, not with blueprints, not with promises, but with presence. Sometime in January, I started bringing Ava to the design studio I rented part-time, just an hour here and there when Maya was working late. I set up a corner with cushions, a whiteboard where she could scribble, and a jar of teething snacks. One day, she crawled under my desk while I was reviewing a logo draft and held up a crumpled Post-it covered in marker. "Duck," she announced proudly. I looked at the drawing. It was more blob than bird. But I saw it. "Yes," I said. "Duck." I took a photo and texted Maya. "Me first studio assistant. Maya, make sure she gets royalties." Those little moments became the currency of our co-parenting. Not just the scheduled handoffs and custody plans, but the in-between shared laughter over texts, surprise visits, the occasional coffee brought unasked. We weren't friends in the traditional sense. We weren't rebuilding the past, but we were building something. Still, not everyone understood. One day, at my niece's birthday party, my sister pulled me aside while Ava napped upstairs. "You sure you're not playing house?" she asked. "What do you mean, you and Maya? This closeness?" She already made her choice once. Just don't let her rewrite history without taking responsibility. "She's not," I said. My sister looked unconvinced. People get nostalgic when things feel familiar. But that doesn't always mean they've changed. I wanted to argue, to defend Maya, to list every small moment that had layered itself into something real. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked back to where Ava was sleeping, her fingers wrapped around that same penguin from Christmas. Maya and I never spoke about what we were. That wasn't the point anymore. We had Ava. We had weekends and weekdays and illnesses and discoveries and tears and all the mundane, brilliant chaos in between. I saw Maya cry once more, only once, on the day Ava had her first real tantrum. She'd been fine all morning, but when it came time to leave my place, she screamed, arching her back, kicking, flailing in Maya's arms. Maya tried to soothe her, tried to sing, but Ava shrieked louder. She finally put her down gently and looked at me with wet eyes. She doesn't want me. She wants both of us, I said. She doesn't know how to ask for that yet. Maya nodded, brushing tears away. I know. So we sat on the couch with her, one parent on each side, and when Ava finally calmed down, she leaned against Maya's chest, clutching my sleeve with one tiny hand. That was us. Awkward. Broken. Whole. One morning in late February, Maya sent me a message. Maya, she said a new word this morning. Me. What is it, Maya? Home. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the word for a long time. Home. And I wondered what Ava thought it meant. Maybe a place. Maybe a smell. Maybe two voices in two different apartments, singing the same lullaby. Whatever it was. She said it, and she meant it. Spring came slowly that year, as if the city wasn't sure whether to let go of winter. The days still held a chill, but buds began pushing through the stubborn dirt along sidewalks, and Ava's laughter echoed louder in the parks. She was walking everywhere now, steady on her feet, with that determined waddle toddlers have when they think they know exactly where they're going and why. One Sunday afternoon, we were in the sculpture garden outside the museum. It had become a ritual I'd take her there after Maya's mid-morning drop-off, and we'd walk between the massive stone figures like we were discovering some long-lost kingdom. Ava always gravitated toward the same one, an abstract bronze curve that she called belly. She pressed both palms to it and shouted, "Hi!" Belly, with such confidence that nearby parents chuckled. I stood back, letting her exist inside her own little world. I wasn't thinking about Maya or custody schedules. I wasn't thinking about what Caleb might say if he saw us. I was just there, present, watching my daughter introduce herself to inanimate metal like it might respond. And that's when I heard the voice. David. I turned. Caleb stood 10 feet away, hands in his pockets. He looked older drawn, like he hadn't slept much in months. His jacket was wrinkled, hair unkempt, but his expression wasn't angry, just uncertain. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said. He nodded toward Ava. "She's big." "She is." He took a step closer. Ava turned, spotted him, and tilted her head curiously. She didn't recognize him. Or maybe she did, but only faintly. "I saw the photos Maya posted," Caleb said. "Didn't think you'd be so involved. Didn't think you'd still be gone," I replied, keeping my tone even. He exhaled through his nose, like he'd expected that. "You're a better father than I thought you'd be," he said. "That's not easy for me to admit." I blinked, caught off guard. "I wasn't trying to steal anything," I said. "I know." We both looked at Ava, who was now circling the sculpture like it was a maypole. "I couldn't be around it," he said quietly. "The reminders, the fact that she doesn't have my eyes, the way Maya looked at you after the baptism." I didn't respond. I thought if I left, she'd come running after me, that she'd say it was a mistake, that she'd choose me again. I looked at him. She did choose you, Caleb, for a long time. But it wasn't honest. He nodded slowly. I know that now. Ava stumbled slightly, and I instinctively moved to catch her. She didn't fall, but she reached up for my hand without hesitation, like she'd been doing it forever. Caleb watched the gesture. His mouth tightened. She knows you, he said. She does. He shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets. I've been thinking of calling a lawyer. I stiffened. Not for a fight. He added quickly. I want to know what my rights are, or if I even have any. She's not yours biologically, but I was there. At the start, you left. I didn't know what else to do. That's not her fault. We stood in silence again, the city murmuring around us. I'm not trying to erase you, I said after a long pause. But this isn't about us anymore. It's about her. And right now, she needs truth. He looked at me, tired and sad. I'm not sure I belong in that version. That's not for me to decide. Or you. It's for her. He nodded, slowly, reluctantly. Then Ava called out, Dada. She was looking straight at me. Caleb turned away. Take care of her, he said, already walking off. I will. He didn't look back. Later that day, Maya came by to pick up Ava. She noticed something in my face right away. You okay? I saw Caleb. Her shoulders tensed. Where? The museum. We talked. And he's hurting, I said. But he knows. He's not pretending anymore. Maya exhaled and sat on the edge of the couch. That's something, I guess. Do you want him involved? She didn't answer right away. I want him to be okay, she said. But I don't know if that means being in her life. She might ask one day. I know. We sat in silence. Ava toddled between us with a crayon in her hand, offering it like an olive branch. Maya took it. Thank you, baby. Ava beamed. We shared dinner again that night, the three of us. Pasta, too many napkins, a bottle of cheap wine we never opened. We watched a movie after Ava fell asleep, half of it, at least. Maya dozed off halfway through, her head resting on the armrest, legs curled beneath her. I watched her sleep, the soft curve of her shoulder rising and falling with every breath. She wasn't the woman I'd once loved. She wasn't the friend I'd once trusted. She was something else now, something harder to define, but no less real. And I was the man in the middle of it all. No longer a donor, no longer a shadow, just a father, learning what it meant to be one. In early April, Ava got sick again. A fever, a rash. Maya called at midnight, panicked. She's burning up again. I think it's worse this time. I'll be there in 10. This time, we took her to the emergency room, sat together in those stiff blue chairs under fluorescent lights, watching other tired parents rock their kids like fragile clocks about to stop. They ran tests. Flu, RSV. It came back viral, nothing serious. Just a waiting game. At 4:15 a.m., Ava finally fell asleep on my chest in the hospital room, and Maya curled up in the chair beside me, her hand resting lightly on Ava's foot. I can't do this alone, she whispered. You're not? I know. We didn't leave until sunrise. The sky outside the hospital was pale gray, like the world hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be yet. We buckled Ava into the car, still drowsy, and stood there for a moment. You should come to her second birthday, Maya said. Not just as a guest, as her father. I'd like that. We can put your name on the invitation this time. I smiled. Might be nice. 2 weeks later, the invitations arrived. White envelopes, handwritten names, simple design. At the top, in soft green lettering, it read, Ava's turning 2. Join her parents, Maya and David, for a celebration. No footnotes. No parentheses. Just the truth. And when the day came, and the guests arrived, and the cake was cut, and someone raised a glass to toast, no one introduced me as the donor. They didn't have to. Ava ran into my arms with frosting on her cheeks and yelled, "Daddy!" And everyone heard it. The party ended with the scent of icing still in the air and half-deflated balloons curling in the corners of the room. After the last guest left, after the wrapping paper was bagged up and the dishes were rinsed and stacked, I sat alone on Maya's back porch, watching the light fade into the soft blue of early evening. Ava was asleep upstairs, crashed hard after too much sugar and too many squeals. Maya had gone up to check on her, leaving me with the silence and the string lights gently swaying above. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. There wasn't music. There wasn't chatter. Just the breeze and the quiet creak of wood beneath me. I don't know how long I sat there before the door slid open again. Maya stepped out, her sweatshirt too big for her, hair pulled up, barefoot on the wood. She brought 2 mugs chamomile tea, probably, and handed one to me without a word. "She's out cold," she said. "She earned it." We sipped in silence. "This is the first time," she said eventually, "that I didn't feel like I had to explain anything to anyone." I looked at her. "You didn't?" She nodded. "I didn't." For a while, we watched the leaves overhead tremble in the wind, the strings of light reflected in the glass door behind us. "You remember that day at the baptism?" she asked, almost smiling. "When the priest said your name, I remember. I've thought about it so many times, about how angry I was at him, at you, at myself for not being able to control the moment. And now..." She trailed off. "Now," I prompted gently. "Now I'm grateful it happened like that, because I think, if it hadn't, I might have kept pretending, just to keep the peace. And instead, we found something real." She nodded. "Inside." Ava stirred faintly, the baby monitor lighting up, then going quiet again. Just a little murmur in her sleep, enough to remind us she was there, that this wasn't a dream. "I don't know what the next few years look like," Maya said. "But I do know I want to keep building this. Whatever this is, I didn't need more than that." We clinked our mugs together lightly, then sat in the hush of a house finally still. There were no labels, no declarations, no neat definitions to close the chapter. Just the steady breath of a child upstairs. Just the quiet understanding between 2 people who had finally learned how to stay.